Everybody, this is Raul Ramirez of the Catch Wrestling Alliance, where we help you elevate your grappling, and together we keep real wrestling alive. Thank you very much for tuning in, watching, or listening on our any podcast platform. Um, so, um, so first things first. If you're in the LA area, feel free to come train with us at Fight Science MMA. The UCLA classes will be starting in I think 2 weeks. They're still on winter break, I believe, this week. Or anyway, our class isn't starting until later on. So in a couple weeks. So if you're a UCLA student, feel free to try it out. Hopefully you like it. Um, if you're not in the area, you feel free to jump on our, CWA Academy on our website, catchwrestlingalliance.com. The other thing, though, too, yeah, with regards to the website, we also use, and if you happen to have anything that you want to teach, um, feel free to try to use our platform as well. We use Kajabi, and so if you use our link below and you let me know that you used it to start your own classes and stuff, it will help the channel, and I'll definitely give you some pointers on how to use it as well, because our Catch Wrestling Alliance Academy is really, really cool. Like, one of the main things that makes it very, very valuable is that we have an online community. So you can think of it as kind of like a Discord server thing, where people can ask questions, and then we just post a bunch of extra videos and stuff on in there that are specifically answering people's questions. So a lot of great value there. If you don't want to do that, feel free to join our YouTube channel. That's also on the link below our YouTube video. It always says join. All that stuff just really helps us out. Really, really appreciated. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get to the subject at hand. So I guess it just came out recently. I don't know. Someone sent it to me today, one of our students, and I saw a bunch of people commenting on it. So it was Mikey Musumeci. I'm sorry, I'm gonna just butcher that name. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I don't speak Italian. So he was talking about. Oh, actually, if you don't know who he is one of the best grapplers in the world. He is like the one championship grappling champion. He's a big butt scooter, right? So he's all about pulling guard, and he got fed up with people criticizing him for not standing up and going for like some wrestling takedown or whatever. So let's go ahead and hear what he has to say, and then we'll kind of talk about it. Because actually, I think he brought up some good points, and I'll tell you like my perspective. So let's go ahead and listen to it.
I'm so sick of hearing people complain about pulling guard and butt scooting in jiu-jitsu. The first thing I'm going to say is, this is sport jiu-jitsu. There's no striking in sport jiu-jitsu. Obviously, in a real fight on the street, on concrete, you're not going to pull guard, right? But in sport jiu-jitsu, the goal is to be able to submit the person as fast as you can, right? Then that leads me to the next point, wrestling in jiu-jitsu. You'll constantly see two guys wrestling in jiu-jitsu. And honestly, let's be honest. Wrestling in jiu-jitsu, the jiu-jitsu people suck at wrestling. Any D1 wrestler will destroy most jiu-jitsu people in wrestling, right? We're horrible at it. So then you'll see two guys, both are horrified to get guillotined, so nobody's shooting, and then they just hand fight the whole time, right? So what are you doing there? You're not even trying to do submissions. You're doing nothing. You're just hand fighting and just wasting time. Who wants to see that? Guard pullers trying to get to submissions, which is the goal of sport jiu-jitsu. Submit the person as fast as you can, right? But then let me ask you another question. You don't want us to pull guard. You don't want us to butt scoot. Fine, take us down. Where do we end up? We end up on bottom just as if we pulled guard. So now I'm confused. Explain to me the difference between somebody taking me down and I end up on bottom, or me pulling guard. One is more efficient than the other, right? One wastes less time for me to submit the person as fast as I can.
All right, so there you heard it. Hopefully, you tuned in long enough to hear the whole thing. But I think he brings up several good points, and I want to kind of go over some of the things that resonate with me. And so, one of the things is like he's kind of like saying that people are complaining about butt scooting, but he's kind of saving you the time and not and he already doing the takedown for you, right? Um, and he would have ended up in that position regardless. So one thing I want to say, just regards to takedowns, is that quite often if you execute a takedown very well and you land on top of the other person, you probably will not land in their guard. You will land past their guard. So you might end up more in like a side control position. So that wouldn't necessarily be landing in guard. So it's a little bit more advantageous to attempt a takedown. But um, with that being said, I also believe that many people shouldn't really be worried about butt scooting. Yeah, like Mikey said, he's already kind of in the down position for you. But I would say yes, like people shouldn't complain, and you should just look at it like, say, if you're the person standing and they sit, you should look at it as just another position in a way where it's like um, you're I don't necessarily think they're giving you an advantage so much because, yeah, if you were, like I said earlier, if you were to have taken them down, you might have ended up in their side control. Whereas right now, they still have their legs like closer to you. And yeah, there's definitely all kinds of Achilles locks and whatnot that you could be going for. So it's, you still, or I think it's still a little bit more of a neutral position, so it's not particularly like advantageous. So that's my point about that. But then another thing that he mentions is people saying that butt scooters are boring, and then he also says that people who are just standing there hand fighting the whole time is also boring. And I believe he's correct about that, or at least in my opinion, I would agree. And what do you like? Like what should? Let me just give you my perspective. So many years ago, when the late Billy Robinson was still alive, I went to train with him in Little Rock, Arkansas, and so we spent a lot of time together outside of the training time. When we were out somewhere, he was talking about his perspective on teaching catch wrestling, and so what he was saying is that like what you want to do is coach somebody or teach somebody the mat wrestling most first, and really emphasize that. Make sure that the student uh, like knows all the ins and outs of being on the ground. So like all the stuff like in what Japanese is called the newaza or whatever, or the ground fighting stuff. So in wrestling, it's called mat wrestling. So when you approach teaching, you really have to emphasize the mat wrestling. So you really focus on all the sit outs, all these different pins, all these different things on the mat. Because, yes, like Mikey said, it's like you want to get to the mat, you want to pin the person or submit them. So you have to really be great at that, right? The takedowns are secondary. So Billy put it in this way where he stated that, say, if you get someone who's really great at takedowns and they're not good at the mat wrestling, then if they get countered and then they get taken down and they don't know what to do, then ultimately it might make them shy to go for takedowns in the future. All right. So in order to prevent someone from being shy or like being scared to attempt a takedown, you have to make sure that the mat wrestling skill is there, right? So if the mat wrestling skill is there, then it doesn't matter if you do the taking down of the person or if you get taken down, because once it gets to the mat, you should be confident that you won't get pinned or you won't get submitted. So that's what you want to kind of take into consideration, or that's what you kind of want to be thinking about. So in that way, if Mikey is correct about people hand fighting because they're scared of getting guillotined, if that's true, or if that's what a lot of people are thinking, then I think it shows ultimately like I guess like a weakness of amateur wrestling, because amateur wrestlers can do a lot, right? They're doing a lot even in the no-gi world, where they can just like dominate most people, right? But then if they get that guillotine, like Mikey mentioned, then uh, then that's they lose, right? So there ultimately is a missing link, right? So maybe later on, they after getting submitted a few times, then they'll get shy about shooting in. Um, so that ultimately can be like or what it ultimately results in that boring thing that Mikey's talking about, where people are just hand fighting back and forth. The takedown never comes, and time's up and stuff. So the catch wrestling perspective is different from the amateur wrestling perspective in that you don't necessarily have to be like this high level Greco, uh, you know, suplex artist. Even though all the suplexes, all like a lot of the Greco stuff is part of catch wrestling, the main thing ultimately is the pin or the submission, right? The control of the person on the mat. So the mat wrestling stuff is the most important part. So going back to what I mentioned about Billy Robinson stating that you really have to build up that mat wrestling muscle in order to then like just go for it, right? So if you're in a match and maybe you are hand fighting, right? You're resisting their takedown attempts or you're blocking their takedown attempts. Uh, since catch wrestling has no points, you can let them take you down, right? Or you can shoot in, knowing full well that you might not like end up on top. Like your double leg might not work, and they might sprawl on you. But your mat wrestling is so good that you definitely won't get guillotined, or at least like there's a very high chance that you won't get guillotined, and you might counter and end up on top, end up passing their guard. So ultimately, there are a couple of things that I think people who are interested in catch wrestling, or people who consider themselves to be catch wrestlers, you want to be thinking in that way, not necessarily thinking about like, oh, I'm going to get a takedown and then just hand fighting, like Mikey said, because yeah, I've seen that plenty of times in all kinds of grappling matches. So I agree that it happens. So that's why to me it signifies that yeah, it is not catch wrestling still, and so then the catch wrestling perspective would be to be so good at the mat wrestling that you can allow the person to take you down, or you can fight for the takedown if you're skilled enough, or if it's obvious or whatever, you set it up, but it's not important, right? So because again, there are no points, so you can use them taking you down as a strategy. So you almost in a way where it's like uh, this would be like the butt scooting of catch wrestling in a way, where you sure let them take you down uh, because you're going to counter and submit them or pin them. So I wanted to kind of like point that out. So I wanted to share the video because I think ultimately what Mikey is complaining about, or his response to complaints to him, shows ultimately a weakness in amateur wrestling. And then that transfer, since like there's a lot of jiu-jitsu schools trying to incorporate a lot of like amateur wrestling, because they think that amateur wrestling is like the entirety of wrestling, and they don't know that the history is of wrestling is much longer than the Olympics and all that. So what's getting transferred into a lot of no-gi nowadays, and even gi or whatever, but what's getting transferred into these jiu-jitsu schools is a lot of amateur wrestling, which again doesn't really have, it doesn't have like double wrist lock, it doesn't have all these traditional wrestling holds that would make you aware of submissions, right? So I think what people don't notice or wouldn't like the average person wouldn't realize is that yeah, he is actually hinting at this part that's missing, right? So when people say wrestling, a lot of them think amateur wrestling, and a lot of them only think takedowns. So they just don't know that wrestling is more complete than just takedowns. And so that was kind of like the takeaway for me. So let's go ahead and listen to it one more time, and feel free to comment if you're listening live. Here we go.
I'm so sick of hearing people complain about pulling guard and butt scooting in jiu-jitsu. The first thing I'm going to say is, this is sport jiu-jitsu. There's no striking in sport jiu-jitsu. Obviously, in a real fight on the street, on concrete, you're not going to pull guard, right? But in sport jiu-jitsu, the goal is to be able to submit the person as fast as you can, right? Then that leads me to the next point, wrestling in jiu-jitsu. You'll constantly see two guys wrestling in jiu-jitsu. And honestly, let's be honest. Wrestling in jiu-jitsu, the jiu-jitsu people suck at wrestling. Any D1 wrestler will destroy most jiu-jitsu people in wrestling, right? We're horrible at it. So then you'll see two guys, both are horrified to get guillotined, so nobody's shooting, and then they just hand fight the whole time, right? So what are you doing there? You're not even trying to do submissions. You're doing nothing. You're just hand fighting and just wasting time. Who wants to see that? Guard pullers trying to get to submissions, which is the goal of sport jiu-jitsu. Submit the person as fast as you can, right? But then let me ask you another question. You don't want us to pull guard. You don't want us to butt scoot. Fine, take us down. Where do we end up? We end up on bottom just as if we pulled guard. So now I'm confused. Explain to me the difference between somebody taking me down and I end up on bottom or me pulling guard. One is more efficient than the other, right? One wastes less time for me to submit the person as fast as I can.
All right. So yeah, I think there's a lot that resonates there with me. I kind of agree with a lot of it, except that the whole idea is like, yeah, if you were able to get a really good takedown, chances are you would land past their guard, right? You wouldn't land in their guard. So that is kind of like the little bit of a difference. And then his whole idea about like being scared of the guillotine, and I think that could be a real fear for people who maybe come from a jiu-jitsu background and then they learn an amateur double leg, and it's completely not cognizant of the counters or the submission counters. And so yeah, then that threat of the guillotine is very real. So it can be I guess like a real fear for some people. And so I don't see anything really wrong with what he said, and it could. And I'm actually more on his side than that. So it's like I think I think people who come from wrestling background, especially amateur wrestling background, if they're complaining about butt scooting, then they shouldn't really consider. They shouldn't consider it a problem. They should find ways to deal with it, right? Think of it as an opportunity to solve a new puzzle, right? So think of it as something fun to try to like to figure out, right? Because there's tons of wrestling oriented counters. I'm sure I've made several videos about different. Actually, when we had even like a whole video series that's on our website. Pressure Passing Volume 2 is specifically about this. So we have like several lessons on there. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I wasn't even thinking about that, but yeah, just made a whole like a whole online course about it. So that's on our website, catchwrestlingalliance.com. Pressure Passing Volume 2 is specifically about that. So I think it's all fun, and I think everyone should think of it in that way too. The one thing that I didn't mention though that he mentioned right off the bat is the whole self defense stuff. Um, I don't know. Maybe somebody has some good self defense from like seated. Who knows? So yeah, there might be some people who might think like, oh well, I'm not. If I get thrown down on the street, from standing, then I might get my skull cracked. So maybe I'll just start seated. Who knows? Who knows if there's some style like that. I think even when in China, there's like dog style or whatever, where supposedly they dive for a lot of like leg locks and stuff. Some old kung fu style. So there might be a whole self defense system that's just trying to like that is about fighting again real life and real life scenarios where the pavement could be a problem, right? So yeah, so the that might that's just like an outlier kind of thing, I guess, where you know you you probably want to stay standing. Ultimately, you want to stay standing, and ultimately, for self defense, you want to try to uh, create distance, and you definitely don't want to get taken down, especially if there's multiple people. Um, so yeah, so I'm just kind of joking around a little bit, but um, yeah, like I think his point is valid. Or he makes a lot of valid points, and like I said earlier, you definitely want to be uh, thinking about like catch wrestling, and ultimately Mikey exposes like the weakness of amateur wrestling and how those weaknesses are being transferred into jujitsu, and um, so then you get people making these criticisms, and you're upsetting Mikey, right? So hopefully that kind of gives people a different perspective, or at least a catch wrestling perspective too, where it's like it's all about the mat wrestling, and that since catch wrestling has the submissions baked in, you're a little bit more aware of when you're in trouble, and so then when you approach a match, and also since there are no points in catch wrestling, then it doesn't matter if you get taken down or not. So you can use getting taken down as a strategy, or if you get the takedown, chances are you're going to end up past their guard. So some things I just wanted to kind of talk about. I think that Mikey raises valid points, and ultimately for me, it's just like another argument for like the necessity of catch wrestling. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section if you're not watching this live. But I just wanted to kind of get something out there because I thought it was cool, and it resonates with me, and hopefully people feel the same way. I think all the grappling is fun. I spend like so many hours. Actually, I go to currently. I was I so Mikey, I guess, is still claiming to be part of Pedigo Submission Wrestling. I've trained there, several months. I think maybe you've seen there was one of one of our friends, Riley Stearns, who is a filmmaker. He filmed the open mat at Pedigo in Los Angeles, and you could totally see me there rolling. So I'm definitely familiar with Pedigo, and these people are very very nice. And so basically, I'm used to a lot of these types of attacks where seated guard and stuff. So I think it's fun. So I don't think people should necessarily like hate on it so much, but engage a little bit more and see what happens. Try to figure out ways to engage and see if you can't get those submissions. All right. With that being said, feel free to support us on our YouTube channel if you want to become a member, or if you want to learn the real thing, feel free to support us and join our CWA Academy on our website. We're also in Los Angeles at Fight Science MMA. Feel free to drop in. You don't have to join the gym. So yeah, and ask any questions, and hopefully we can help you elevate your grappling, and then together we keep real wrestling alive.